Part 1. Unexpected Guardian Commander Rohan Hayes straightened his formal diplomatic uniform as the double moons of Valastra rose above the crystalline spires of the royal city. 6 months into his assignment as Earth's representative to the Valastran conclave, and he still found himself awestruck by the alien architecture that seemed to defy gravity itself. Luminescent buildings stretched skyward, their transparent facades reflecting the purple-tinged moonlight in hypnotic patterns. "Still not used to it, Commander?" asked Lin Chen, his deputy attaché, adjusting her own formal wear. "I've been here 2 years and it still takes my breath away." "Not sure anyone could get used to this," Rohan replied, watching as Valastran nobles glided past on hovering platforms, their iridescent scales shimmering beneath elaborate ceremonial garments. "Especially not on the Night of Thousand Lights. Tonight marked the most sacred festival in the Valastran calendar, a celebration of their first contact with the stars beyond their system. For humans to be invited was itself a diplomatic milestone. For Rohan to have secured an invitation to the inner sanctum, where Queen Selene herself would perform the ancient rituals, was unprecedented. Ambassador Threll seemed particularly insistent. "That you attend?" Lin remarked as they approached the towering ceremonial gates. "That's unusual for the Valastrans. They typically prefer to keep humans at arm's length during sacred ceremonies." Rohan nodded thoughtfully. The Valastrans were cautious by nature, having evolved as prey species before technology elevated them to dominance of their world. Despite establishing diplomatic relations with Earth 3 decades ago, true integration remained elusive. Humans were still viewed with a mixture of fascination and wariness by most Valastrans. The Queen requested. "My presence specifically," Rohan explained. "Ambassador Threll wouldn't say why." Lin raised an eyebrow but said nothing as they presented their credentials to the royal guards. Tall, sinuous beings with reinforced exoskeletons that contrasted with the more delicate appearance of civilian Valastrans. "Commander Hayes," announced the chief guard, voice melodic despite the formal tone. "You are directed to the Sovereign's observance platform. Your associate will join the diplomatic section." Lin shot him a surprised look. "The Sovereign's platform? That's where the royal family stands." "I'm aware," Rohan replied, equally puzzled. "Follow protocols. I'll find you after the ceremony." They parted ways, and Rohan was escorted through a series of increasingly ornate chambers, each seeming to fold into existence from what had appeared to be solid crystal walls. The Valastran architectural technology still defied human understanding. Structures that reconfigured themselves according to need, materials that responded to specific biological signatures. The final chamber opened onto a platform suspended above a vast amphitheater. Below, thousands of Valastrans had gathered, their scales creating a living mosaic that rippled with anticipation. Directly ahead stood Queen Selene, her back to him as she gazed out at her people. Even from behind, she was unmistakable. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with scales that shifted from midnight blue to deep purple depending on the light, she wore a ceremonial headdress that contained actual living crystals, organisms unique to Valastra that formed symbiotic relationships with the planet's sentient species. "Commander Hayes," she spoke without turning, her voice carrying that distinctive harmonic quality all Valastrans possessed. "You honor us with your presence." "The honor is mine, your radiance," Rohan replied, using the formal address as he'd been trained. He bowed deeply, even though she wasn't looking. Protocol was everything in Valastran culture. "Please stand beside me," the Queen said, finally turning. Her eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangle, studied him with unexpected intensity. "Tonight is significant beyond tradition." Rohan moved carefully to the indicated position, aware that every eye in the royal entourage was upon him. He recognized members of the High Council, the Queen's personal guard, and several religious leaders. All seemed surprised, some visibly disturbed by his placement beside their sovereign. "May I ask the significance of my invitation, Your Radiance?" Rohan asked quietly as ceremonial music began to resonate throughout the amphitheater. Queen Selene's middle eye blinked slowly, a sign of deliberation among her kind. "The stars have spoken of change, Commander, of bridges between worlds built by single acts. Tonight, we honor our first journey to the stars. Perhaps it is fitting that you stand with us as we contemplate the next great journey." Before Rohan could inquire further, she raised her arms, and the ceremony began. The amphitheater darkened until only the natural bioluminescence of the Valastrans themselves provided light, thousands of living beings creating constellations below. The queen began the ritual invocation, her voice resonating in harmonics that made Rohan's skin tingle. As she spoke, points of light began to appear throughout the amphitheater, rising slowly like earthly fireflies, but with deliberate patterns that formed three-dimensional star maps. Rohan was so entranced by the spectacle that he almost missed the sudden tensing of the Queen's personal guard. Almost. Years of military training before his diplomatic appointment had honed instincts that never fully disappeared. Something was wrong. His eyes scanned the darkness, seeking whatever had alarmed the guards. There, a shadow moving against shadow, high among the crystal spires that surrounded the amphitheater. Then another, and another. The ceremony continued, the queen oblivious as she conducted the sacred rituals. The floating lights had now formed a perfect replica of the Valastran solar system, rotating slowly above the gathered crowd. Rohan leaned slightly toward the captain of the Queen's Guard, intending to quietly alert him to the movement he'd observed. But before he could speak, a flash of green light erupted from one of the shadows, streaking toward the platform. "Down!" Rohan shouted, all protocol forgotten as he lunged toward the Queen. Time seemed to slow. The green energy bolt, some kind of plasma weapon, was aimed directly at Queen Selene's central thorax. The royal guards were reacting, but too slowly. The Queen had just begun to turn, confusion replacing the serenity on her alien features. Rohan's body moved on instinct, placing itself between monarch and projectile. The impact came with searing pain across his back and shoulder, the smell of burning flesh, his own, filling his nostrils as he collapsed against the Queen, driving them both to the platform floor. Chaos erupted. More energy bolts rained down. Guards returned fire with precision weapons that seemed to materialize from their exoskeletons. The ceremonial lights scattered in panic, plunging parts of the amphitheater into darkness, while others flared with combat illumination. "Stay down, Your Radiance," Rohan managed, gritting his teeth against the agony as he maintained his protective position above the Queen. Warm liquid, his blood, was soaking through his uniform. "You're injured," the Queen stated, her three eyes wide with what he recognized as shock, even across species. "For me. You've sacrificed for me." Before Rohan could respond, a second bolt struck him in the lower back. The world blurred. He was vaguely aware of the Queen calling for her guards, of being moved, of emergency medical protocols being initiated. But mostly, as consciousness faded, he was aware of the Queen's voice, no longer serene and melodic, but sharp with what sounded remarkably like human concern. "Save him," she commanded. "Whatever it takes. Save the human who bled for Valastra." Rohan awoke to unfamiliar sensations. His body felt simultaneously weightless and immovable. The pain he expected was absent, replaced by a tingling numbness that spread from his spine outward. When he finally managed to open his eyes, he found himself suspended in a translucent blue gel within a Valastran medical pod. "The commander is conscious," announced a voice. One of the Valastran physicians, he presumed. "Good. Leave us." That voice he recognized immediately. With effort, Rohan turned his head toward it. Queen Selene stood beside his pod, her ceremonial attire replaced by simpler robes that nonetheless marked her royal status. Against all protocol, she was alone. No guards, no attendants. "Your Radiance," he attempted to speak, his voice distorted by the medical gel. "The attackers were captured or eliminated," she replied, placing a six-fingered hand against the external surface of the pod. "You need not concern yourself with that now. Your focus must be recovery." "How bad?" he asked. The Queen's middle eye blinked slowly again. "By human standards, fatal. The weapons used were designed to disperse acidic plasma upon impact. They dissolved 28% of your dermal layer and damaged several internal organs. The second shot severed your spinal column." Rohan absorbed this with the detached calm of someone who didn't yet fully comprehend their situation. "Yet, I'm alive. Valastran medical technology is considerably advanced beyond Earth's," she said, with what might have been the subtle equivalent of a smile. "Though we had to adapt it considerably for your physiology. You are the first human to experience complete cellular reconstruction using our methods. Experimental treatment," Rohan concluded. "I'm guessing Earth Command wasn't consulted." "There was no time," the Queen replied simply, "and I had made a promise." Memory flickered, her voice commanding that he be saved, whatever it took. "Thank you, Your Radiance." "No," she said firmly, her harmonic voice resonating with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. "It is I who must thank you, Commander Hayes. Your actions have no precedent in our diplomatic history. No outsider has ever placed themselves in mortal danger for a Valastran sovereign." Rohan would have shrugged if his body had been capable of the movement. "It's what humans do for allies, for friends." "Friends," she repeated the word as if testing its weight. "An interesting concept. Valastrans have allies, vassals, and sovereigns. The notion of friendship, especially one worth dying for, is not embedded in our cultural understanding." "Consider it a human eccentricity," Rohan said, attempting humor, despite his situation. "An eccentricity that saved my life," the Queen replied. "One that has created complications." Something in her tone made Rohan pay closer attention. "Political complications?" "Among others," she agreed. "The High Council is in disarray. Some members see your action as proof that humans are valuable allies with unexpected loyalty. Others view it as a dangerous entanglement. Proof that humans are too unpredictable, too emotional to be trusted with close relations." "And what does the Queen believe?" Rohan asked, surprising himself with his directness. Queen Selene's scales rippled with iridescence, a physiological response he hadn't observed before. "I believe you have changed many things, Commander Hayes, including perhaps the future of our worlds." She moved her hand away from the pod, straightening to her full, impressive height. "Rest now. When you are recovered enough to leave the healing chamber, we will speak again. There are matters of significant importance to discuss." As she turned to leave, Rohan called out, "Your Radiance? The festival? Was it completed?" She paused, looking back at him with all three eyes. "No, Commander. For the first time in 10,000 years, the ceremony of Thousand Lights stands unfinished." After a moment, she added, "But perhaps it has achieved its purpose nonetheless. Change has come, as the stars foretold." With that cryptic statement, she departed, leaving Rohan alone with the quiet hum of alien medical technology and the growing realization that his diplomatic mission had just become far more complicated than anyone on Earth could have anticipated. In the healing gel, disconnected from pain and the full weight of reality, he wondered what the coming days would bring. Whatever diplomatic incident his actions had caused, whatever complications the Queen had referred to, one fact remained certain. Given the same circumstances, he would make the same choice again. Not for politics, not for strategic advantage, but because when faced with a threat to an innocent life, even an alien one, something fundamental in human nature demanded action. It was, as he had told the Queen, simply what humans do. Blood. Of two worlds, 7 days passed before the Valastron physicians deemed Rohan stable enough to leave the medical pod. 7 days of drifting in and out of consciousness as alien biotechnology rewove his damaged spine and regenerated organs that human medicine would have declared irreparable. 7 days during which Earth Command had apparently been in continuous, tense communication with the Valastran High Council regarding his status. "They wanted to transport you back to Earth," explained Lin Chen, who sat beside his recovery bed in what appeared to be private quarters within the royal palace. "The medical team refused, saying moving you would kill you. It nearly caused a diplomatic incident." Rohan ran his fingers along his spine, marveling at the absence of pain where devastating injuries had been. "I'm guessing Ambassador Reynolds wasn't pleased," Lin snorted. "That's putting it mildly. She's been sending hourly demands for updates and threatening to involve the Interstellar Coalition if they don't release you." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "But that's not the strangest part, Rohan. The Queen has personally intervened 3 times to block Earth's requests, and there are rumors." "What kind of rumors?" Rohan asked, carefully testing his limbs. They responded normally, though everything felt slightly different, lighter, more responsive. "The Valastran religious caste is in an uproar. Something about prophecies and star-crossers. The royal castle has received pilgrims from across there. Southern continent all coming to see you." Rohan frowned. "Me? Why?" "No one's explaining it clearly, but it has something to do with your actions at the ceremony. The Valastran concept of self-sacrifice is complicated. Apparently, what you did doesn't translate easily into their cultural framework." She handed him a data tablet. "Earth Command wants a full report as soon as you're able." Before Rohan could respond, the chamber doors slid open with a melodic chime. A Valastran royal attendant entered, his scales a pale green that indicated lower noble status. "Commander Hayes," the attendant spoke with formal precision. "Her Radiance requests your presence in the Contemplation Garden when you feel capable. Your companion must return to the diplomatic quarters." Lin shot Rohan a concerned look. "I don't think you should be alone yet. You just got out of critical care." "I'm fine," Rohan assured her, though in truth he wasn't entirely certain. His body felt strange, functional but altered in subtle ways he couldn't quite articulate. "Tell Ambassador Reynolds I'll submit my report after meeting with the Queen." After Lin reluctantly departed, Rohan dressed in the clothing provided, a curious hybrid of human diplomatic attire and Valastran formal wear. The material felt alive somehow, adjusting to his movements with microscopic precision. The royal attendant led him through a labyrinth of crystal corridors that shifted and realigned as they walked, eventually opening onto an enclosed garden unlike anything Rohan had ever seen. The vegetation pulsed with bioluminescence, creating patterns that seemed almost mathematical in their precision. In the center, surrounded by floating botanical specimens, sat Queen Selene. "Commander," she acknowledged as he approached. "Your recovery progresses well?" "Better than expected, Your Radiance," Rohan replied, bowing. "I'm told I have your medical team to thank for that." "Among others," she said enigmatically. She gestured to a formation of crystal that reshaped itself into a seat beside her. "Please join me. What we must discuss requires both privacy and equality of position." Rohan carefully lowered himself onto the offered seat, noticing how it adjusted, to accommodate his human anatomy. "You have created quite the conundrum, Commander Hayes," the Queen began without preamble. "In saving my life, you have activated ancient protocols within our society that have not been invoked for 17 generations. I apologize for any cultural complications." The Queen raised a six-fingered hand, stopping him. Do not apologize for an act of such significance. What you must understand is the rarity of what occurred. Velostrans evolved from herd-dwelling prey species. Our instinct, when threatened, is collective self-preservation through strategic sacrifice of the vulnerable. Your people would sacrifice their own queen? Rohan asked, surprised. Not by conscious choice, she clarified, but by deep biological imperative. Over millennia, we have developed cultural and technological safeguards against these instincts. The Royal Guard, for instance, is genetically modified to override the preservation response. But even they hesitated for 2.7 seconds when the attack began. While you, a human with no biological connection to our species, acted in 0.8 seconds to place yourself in the path of certain death. Rohan shifted uncomfortably. As I said before, it's what humans do. Perhaps, the Queen acknowledged, but it is not what Velostrans do, and therein lies both the problem and the opportunity. She rose, moving to a floating crystal orb that hovered nearby. With a gesture, it expanded into a three-dimensional display of what appeared to be ancient Velostran text. Our oldest laws, established before we achieved spaceflight, contain provisions for exceptional cases of life debt. When someone saves a sovereign from death through willing self-sacrifice, they become Tiavash, blood of the stars. It is a sacred status that transcends ordinary hierarchies. I'm not sure I understand the implications, Rohan admitted. The Queen's three eyes focused on him with unsettling intensity. The implications, Commander Hayes, are that according to our most fundamental laws, you are entitled to request anything within my power to grant. Additionally, you have the right to be offered integration into Velostran society at its highest levels, including genetic compatibility. Rohan blinked in confusion. Genetic compatibility? Your radiance. While I'm honored by these traditions, I'm still human. Our species aren't biologically compatible. They were not, she corrected. The medical treatments you received incorporated more than healing. To save your life, we had to fundamentally alter aspects of your cellular structure using royal genetic material as a template. You are still human, Commander, but you are also now partly Velostran. The revelation hit Rohan like a physical blow. He stared at his hands, suddenly aware of the subtle differences he'd been feeling. The strange lightness, the heightened sensitivity. You changed me? Without consent? His voice was steadier than he expected, given the shock coursing through him. It was necessary to preserve your life, the Queen replied without apology. The alternative was to watch you die from injuries sustained protecting me. Would you have preferred that outcome? Rohan took a deep breath, processing the implications. Earth Command will view this as biological experimentation on a human diplomat. It could shatter the alliance. Perhaps, the Queen acknowledged, or it could transform it into something far more meaningful. The High Council is divided on the matter. The traditionalists believe I have betrayed our genetic purity by allowing your transformation. The progressives see it as the fulfillment of ancient prophecies about joining with the stars. And what does the Queen believe? Rohan asked for the second time since the attack. Queen Celine's scales rippled with that same iridescence he'd noticed in the medical chamber. I believe that when you placed yourself between me and death, you created a possibility that transcends ordinary politics. The question now is whether we have the courage to embrace that possibility. She approached him, moving with the fluid grace characteristic of her species. There is another aspect to consider, Commander. The attack was not a random act of violence, it was orchestrated by the Crimson Helix, a faction that opposes all alliance with Earth and other human colonies. You're saying I was the target? Rohan asked, pieces falling into place. No, I was the target precisely because I have advocated for stronger ties with humanity. The Crimson Helix believes Velastron purity can only be maintained through isolation. They see humans as particularly dangerous, unpredictable, emotional, capable of both great violence and, as you demonstrated, unexpected self-sacrifice. And now I'm some kind of hybrid, Rohan said quietly. I imagine that's their worst nightmare. Indeed, the Queen confirmed. Which is why what happens next is of critical importance. The Crimson Helix's attack failed, but they have succeeded in creating a crisis point for our alliance. How we respond will determine whether our worlds move toward integration or retreat into mutual suspicion. Rohan stood, testing his balance. His body felt stronger despite the lingering strangeness. What exactly are you proposing, Your Radiance? The ancient laws provide a path, she said. The blood bond ceremony, Tiavash Koril. It would formalize your status as one who shares the blood of the stars with Valastra's sovereign line. It would grant you dual citizenship, diplomatic immunity across all Velastran territories, and a permanent position as advisor to the throne. And Earth? My duties to my own people? Would continue, but with expanded scope, she replied. You would become the living embodiment of our alliance, neither fully human nor fully Velastran, but a bridge between worlds. Rohan paced the garden, mind racing. This is beyond my authority to decide. Earth Command has already been informed of the possibility, the Queen interrupted. Ambassador Reynolds has registered formal objections on behalf of Earth's government. They fear you will be used as leverage against human interests or studied for military applications. Not unreasonable concerns, Rohan pointed out. Perhaps not, she conceded, but consider the alternative. If you reject the blood bond, the traditionalists will claim vindication. Humans, they will say, are unwilling to commit to true alliance. They demand Velastran loyalty while withholding their own. The Crimson Helix's support will grow. That's manipulative, Your Radiance. It is reality, she corrected. Politics among my people is ancient and complex. I cannot change millennia of cultural evolution in a single decision. I can only work within existing frameworks to create new possibilities. Rohan fell silent, contemplating the garden around them. Each plant seemed to respond to his proximity, turning subtly toward him as if recognizing something in his altered biology. There's something you're not telling me, he said finally, about the changes to my body. What else happened during the treatment? The Queen's middle eye blinked slowly, that deliberative gesture he was coming to recognize. Perceptive. Yes, there are aspects we have not yet discussed. The genetic modifications were necessary for survival, but they have had unexpected secondary effects. You have begun to develop certain Velastran capabilities. What kinds of capabilities? Enhanced sensory perception, accelerated healing, and potentially, though this remains theoretical, telepathic sensitivity. Velastrans evolved limited telepathic abilities for herd communication. The genetic material used in your treatment came from the royal lineage, which possesses the strongest telepathic potential. Rohan fought to maintain his diplomatic composure. So I've been turned into some kind of human Velastran psychic hybrid without my consent, and now I'm being asked to formalize this transformation through an ancient blood. Ritual that will essentially make me a permanent representative of both species? Succinctly put, the Queen agreed, apparently missing or ignoring his sarcasm. And if I refuse? Then you return to Earth, where your altered biology will likely be studied extensively by your own scientists. The alliance between our worlds will probably deteriorate as traditionalist elements gain greater influence in the High Council, and the Crimson Helix will be emboldened to attempt more direct actions against both Velastran progressives and human interests. Rohan rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache, or perhaps it was the first stirrings of alien telepathic ability. He couldn't be sure. When would this ceremony take place? 3 days hence, at the rising of both moons, if you consent. I need to speak with Earth Command first, Rohan insisted, and I want complete medical data on exactly what changes were made to my body. Of course, the Queen nodded. Though I must warn you that Ambassador Reynolds has already threatened to remove you forcibly from Valastra if you agree to the ceremony. She believes you are being coerced or manipulated. Am I? Rohan asked directly. For the first time, Queen Selene showed what appeared to be genuine surprise. You saved my life, Commander Hayes. Everything that has followed, your treatment, this offer stems from my obligation to honor that sacrifice. I seek balance between our worlds, not advantage over yours. Something in her tone rang true, though Rohan couldn't determine if that was intuition or some new alien sense developing within him. Either way, he found himself believing her. I'll need those medical records, secure communication with Earth Command, and time to consider, he said finally. All shall be provided, the Queen assured him. But remember, Commander, this moment, this choice, may not come again. The stars spoke of bridges built by single acts. Your act has created this bridge. The question remains whether we will cross it together. As Rohan left the contemplation garden, his mind swirled with implications both personal and political. He had come to Valastra as a diplomat, tasked with maintaining cordial but carefully bounded relations between human and Valastran interests. Now he found himself transformed, physically, politically, perhaps even spiritually, into something unprecedented. The human part of him recoiled at the violation of his biological autonomy, the alteration of his very cells without consent. Yet another part, whether his diplomat's perspective or something newly Valastran within him, recognized the extraordinary opportunity this presented. A true bridge between species, embodied in one individual who understood both worlds. As he rounded a crystal corridor, he caught his reflection in the translucent surface, still recognizably Rohan Hayes, but with subtle differences. His eyes seemed to reflect light differently, and faint patterns had begun to emerge on his skin. Not quite Valastran scales, but something between human and alien. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. This moment, this choice, may not come again. In 3 days, under the light of twin moons, he would have to decide not just his own fate, but potentially the future relationship between two worlds. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, he knew, the Crimson Helix was watching, waiting for his answer. A murmur rippled through the assembled council. This was not the formal response they had expected, but the Queen's 3 eyes blinked in what Rohan had come to recognize as approval. The Starblood has spoken, the Hierophant announced. His intent is declared. Proceed to the exchange of essence. Queen Selene stepped forward, taking the ceremonial dagger. With practiced precision, she drew it across her palm, releasing droplets of royal blood, a deep purple that seemed to capture and reflect light. She held her hand over the pool, allowing 7 drops to fall into the luminescent liquid. Blood of Valastra, she intoned, continuous from the first awakening. The Hierophant presented the dagger to Rohan. Following the Queen's example, he drew it across his palm, surprised at how little pain he felt, another sign of his changing physiology. His blood, still recognizably human but with an unusual iridescent quality, dripped into the pool alongside the Queen's. Blood of Earth, he said, improvising slightly from the traditional words. Carried across stars to join with Valastra. The liquid in the pool began to swirl, the 2 blood samples visibly intertwining but not fully merging, maintaining distinct identities while forming an inseparable pattern. The essence mingles but does not consume, observed the Hierophant. A favorable sign. We proceed to convergence. At this signal, the 7 crystal pillars surrounding the pool began to pulse more intensely, their light focusing inward. The combined blood-infused liquid rose from the pool, forming a rotating sphere in the air between Rohan and the Queen. Place your hands within the convergence, instructed the Hierophant. What comes next will be unique to your joining. Do not resist the connection. Rohan and Queen Selene simultaneously reached toward the floating sphere. As their hands penetrated its surface, the liquid adhered to their skin, creating a visible connection between them. Instantly, Rohan felt a surge of telepathic energy, far stronger than the fleeting moments he had experienced before. His mind was suddenly flooded with Velastron perspectives, the complex herd consciousness that underpinned their society, the mathematical precision with which they perceived reality, the deep-rooted caution born from evolutionary history as prey species. Through the Queen's consciousness, he glimpsed the weight of sovereignty, the careful balance she maintained between tradition and progress. And she, he realized, was experiencing his human perspectives in return, the individualistic drive, the emotional complexity, the adaptability that had allowed humans to survive and thrive. Through him, she was understanding humanity not as an intellectual concept, but as a lived experience. The liquid sphere expanded, enveloping both their arms up to the elbow. The sensation was neither painful nor pleasant, but profoundly transformative. Rohan felt his perception of reality itself shifting, expanding to encompass both human and Velastran ways of understanding. The convergence is complete, announced the Hierophant as the liquid gradually receded, flowing back into the pool, but leaving faint matching patterns etched on both Rohan's and the Queen's skin. The Tiavash Choral is accomplished. Commander. Rohan Hayes, you are now Satyavash, one who carries star blood. You stand in the light of both worlds. The temple resonated with a harmonic tone that seemed to come from the crystal structure itself. Even the traditionalist council members bowed their heads in acknowledgement of the completed ritual. Ambassador Reynolds, who had observed from the designated position for foreign witnesses, appeared torn between diplomatic professionalism and genuine alarm at what she had just witnessed. Rohan could sense her conflicted emotions now, another aspect of his enhanced perception. It is done, said Queen Selene, addressing not just those present, but also the watching eyes of Earth. The alliance between our worlds is no longer merely words on diplomatic documents. It lives in shared blood, shared perception, shared purpose. As the formal ceremony concluded and the assembly began to disperse, Rohan noticed a subtle shift in how the Valastrans regarded him. There was still wariness, still uncertainty, but also something new, recognition. Not as human, not as Velastran, but as something they had no existing category for. The Queen remained by the pool, motioning for Rohan to stay as others departed. When they were relatively alone, save for her personal guards and Ambassador Reynolds, who refused to leave Rohan, unattended, she spoke in a lower tone. What you experienced during convergence, you understand now? Rohan nodded slowly. I saw everything. Your history, your biological imperatives, your challenges as a species, and the threat we face. Yes, she confirmed. The Crimson Helix is more dangerous than even my council realizes. They are not merely traditionalists opposed to human alliance. They have made contact with extremist factions among your own people. Reynolds stepped forward, professional caution warring with curiosity. What extremist factions? Earth pure, Rohan answered before the Queen could, drawing on the knowledge that had flowed into him during the convergence. A human supremacist, group that believes any alliance with non-human intelligence compromises Earth's security. They've been providing the Crimson Helix with internal information about human diplomatic protocols and defense systems. Reynolds' eyes widened. That's classified information. How could you possibly— The blood bond does more than create a political connection, Queen Selene explained. It creates access to collective knowledge. What I know, he now knows, including information shared in confidence by your own security services. This is exactly the kind of security breach Earth Command feared, Reynolds said, her voice tight with controlled anger. That information was shared with Valastran intelligence under strict non-disclosure agreements. And now we understand why those agreements were broken, Rohan interjected. The Crimson Helix has infiltrated your highest intelligence services, Your Radiance. They've been feeding selected information to Earth Pure for months, creating the conditions for mutual suspicion and eventual conflict. The Queen's 3 eyes narrowed, a sign of intense focus. The assassination attempt was merely one operation in a larger campaign. They seek to push our worlds apart by exploiting our natural tendencies, Valastran caution and human aggressiveness. We need to take this to both governments immediately, Rohan said, turning to Reynolds. Now that we understand the full scope, we can't simply present this as evidence, Reynolds interrupted. No diplomatic or legal body will accept information obtained through whatever this ceremonial connection is. We need concrete proof. We have it, the Queen said. Or rather, we can obtain it. The prisoner captured after the assassination attempt. We've been unable to break through his mental barriers. But now, with the Satyavash bond complete, Rohan understood immediately. I could connect with him telepathically. As neither fully human nor fully Valastran, I might bypass whatever protection he has against standard interrogation. Absolutely not, Reynolds objected. You're still an Earth diplomat. I cannot authorize you to participate in telepathic interrogation, a practice not even recognized under interstellar coalition law. With respect, Ambassador, Rohan replied, feeling the weight of his new dual identity. I am also now Satyavash to the Valastran crown. This threat targets both our worlds. Would you prefer we wait for the next assassination attempt? Or perhaps a more direct conflict engineered by these groups? Reynolds fell silent, clearly calculating the diplomatic and ethical implications. Let us proceed this way, the Queen suggested. Your Earth Command should be informed of our suspicions without detailing the method by which we obtained them. Meanwhile, Commander Hayes and I will seek confirmation from the prisoner. If we obtain actionable intelligence, we can present it through conventional channels, attributing it to traditional investigation methods. A diplomatic fiction, Reynolds said flatly. A pragmatic solution, Rohan countered. One that serves both our worlds while respecting the limitations of our current legal frameworks. The prisoner's cell was unlike human confinement facilities. Rather than physical barriers, he was held within a fluctuating energy field that adapted continuously to his biorhythms, preventing escape while maintaining physical health. A member of the Valastran noble caste, his pale blue scales marked him as part of an ancient lineage, one that had apparently embraced the Crimson Helix's xenophobic ideology. Talisk Vasoran, Queen Selene addressed him formally. You face the judgment of the Crown for crimes against Valastra and its allies. The prisoner's 3 eyes fixed on Rohan with obvious disgust. You bring your pet human to witness, Majesty? Or perhaps to demonstrate what becomes of our noble bloodlines when contaminated by lesser species? Rohan felt a flash of the old human anger at the insult, but it was tempered now by his Valastran understanding. Fear, not hatred, drove the Crimson Helix. Fear of change, of losing identity, of evolutionary uncertainty. I bring Satyavash, the Queen corrected. One who carries the blood of both worlds. Recognition and horror dawned in the prisoner's eyes. You performed the Tiavash Choral with this creature? The ancient rituals were never meant for... The ancient rituals were meant for exactly this purpose, Rohan interrupted, surprised at how the formal Valastran speech patterns now came naturally to him. To recognize those who stand between death and life, between worlds and stars, as your own sacred texts describe. He stepped closer to the energy field, feeling the telepathic abilities awakened by the blood bond ceremony stirring within him. You know why we're here, Talisk Vasoran. Your mental barriers may resist Velastran telepathic techniques. They may resist human interrogation methods, but they were not designed to resist both simultaneously. You cannot, the prisoner began, but fell silent as Rohan placed his hand against the energy field. Instead of being repelled, his touch created a disturbance in the barrier, a unique interaction between his hybrid biology and the Velastran technology. I don't wish to violate your mind, Rohan said quietly, but the safety of both our worlds depends on understanding the full extent of the Crimson Helix's plans. Show me willingly, and I promise fair treatment under both Velastran and human justice systems. The prisoner's resistance was formidable. Layers of mental discipline and possibly biochemical alterations designed specifically to prevent telepathic intrusion. But as Rohan had suspected, these defenses had been created to block pure Velastran telepathy. His hybrid abilities operated differently, finding pathways through the protection rather than attempting to overwhelm it. Images and information flowed between them. Secret meetings between Crimson Helix leaders and representatives of Earth Pure. Detailed plans for escalating incidents between humans and Valastrans. And most alarmingly, the location of a hidden facility where joint operations were being coordinated. When Rohan finally withdrew his consciousness from the connection, he was shaking with the effort and the weight of what he had discovered. "We have 3 days," he told the Queen, his voice hoarse. "They're planning a simultaneous strike against the Earth Embassy here and the Velastran Consulate on Mars. They intend to make each species believe the other is responsible." Queen Celine's scales pulsed with alarm. A physiological response Rohan could now both see and feel telepathically. A direct attack rather than manipulation through proxies. They grow desperate. Because of us, Rohan realized. The blood bond. Ceremony was broadcast to both worlds. They fear what it represents. True integration rather than mere diplomatic alliance. "We must act immediately," the Queen declared. "Inform your Ambassador Reynolds. I will convene the High Council." 24 hours later, a joint human-Velastran strike force was assembled aboard the Velastran military vessel Stellar Convergence. Earth Command, after initial resistance, had recognized the credibility of the intelligence when key details were independently verified through their own sources. Ambassador Reynolds, though still uncomfortable with Rohan's transformation, had pragmatically acknowledged its utility in the current crisis. "The target facility is located in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter," Rohan explained to the assembled team, a mix of human special forces and Velastran royal guards. Using his newly enhanced abilities, he projected a 3-dimensional map of the hidden base. "According to the intelligence we've gathered, both Earth Pure and Crimson Helix leadership are currently on site, coordinating the planned attacks. Our objective is capture, not elimination," added Captain Lin Chen, who had been appointed as the human tactical lead. "We need these individuals alive to stand trial under both human and Velastran law. The facility has integrated defense systems from both our technologies," Rohan continued. "Under normal circumstances, this would make infiltration extremely difficult. However," he gestured, and the holographic display zoomed in on a specific section of the asteroid base. "My unique biological signature should allow us to bypass certain security measures. I register as both human and Velastran simultaneously, creating a logic conflict in the identification systems." Queen Celine, who had insisted on personally overseeing the operation despite her council's objections, stepped forward. "This mission represents more than a security operation. It is the first true cooperation between our species, fighting together against those who would divide us." As the strike team made final preparations, Rohan found himself approached by Ambassador Reynolds. "Commander Hayes," she began formally, then hesitated. "Rohan, I need to ask you something directly." "Of course, Ambassador. After this is over, assuming we succeed, what do you intend to do? Earth Command is concerned about your long-term status. You've become something unprecedented in interspecies relations. Rohan had been considering this question himself. His transformation was irreversible, his perception forever altered. He could never return fully to his human life, yet he wasn't Velastron either. "I intend to serve both worlds," he answered honestly. "As bridge, as translator, as living proof that our differences can become strengths rather than divisions. My unique position allows me to understand perspectives that neither humans nor Velastrans can fully grasp on their own." Reynolds nodded slowly. "I've been authorized to offer you a new position. Special Envoy for Interspecies Relations. You would maintain your Earth citizenship while acknowledging your unique status with Velastra. And the Queen has offered a similar role in her court," Rohan confirmed. "I believe I can fulfill both, Ambassador. In fact, I believe that's precisely what my transformation has prepared me for. Just be careful during this operation," Reynolds said, with uncharacteristic personal concern. "You've become too valuable to lose, to either world." The Joint Strike Force deployed with precision born of both human adaptability and Velastran, meticulous planning. As predicted, Rohan's hybrid biology created confusion in the security systems, allowing the team to penetrate deep into the facility before resistance organized. The battle was brief but intense. Earth-pure militants fought with the desperate conviction of fanatics, while the Crimson Helix members employed biochemical enhancements that made them formidable opponents, yet against the combined might of human special forces and Velastron. Royal Guards, fighting with unexpected synergy, they were ultimately overwhelmed. In the command center of the facility, Rohan and Queen Selene confronted the leaders of both extremist groups. The Earth-Pure commander, a former military officer, named Richards, glared at Rohan with undisguised revulsion. "Traitor to your species," he spat. "Look what they've turned you into, neither human nor alien, just a diplomatic abomination." Beside him, the Crimson Helix leader, a Velastran elder named Mavic, displayed the characteristic stillness of his species' contempt. "The royal bloodline, contaminated for political expediency, our ancestors would weep at such degradation." Queen Selene regarded them both with regal composure. "Your ancestors feared the unknown, as all prey species naturally do. But Velastra evolved beyond those limitations, not by isolation but by adaptation, by learning from other worlds, other perspectives." "You speak of evolution," Richard scoffed. "We speak of survival. Humanity cannot afford to dilute its strength through misguided alliances." "Yet here you stand," Rohan observed, "allied with the very aliens you claim to despise, cooperating despite your ideologies because you recognized a shared goal was more important than your differences." He allowed himself a slight smile. "In your own way, you've demonstrated exactly why our worlds should come together." As the prisoners were secured and evidence of their planned attacks documented for legal proceedings, Rohan found himself standing with Queen Selene at a viewport, gazing out at the stars that connected their worlds. "What you said to them," she remarked, "about their unwitting demonstration of cooperation, that was quite profound. A perspective that neither pure human nor pure Velastran might have articulated," Rohan acknowledged. "Perhaps that's the true value of what I've become. Not the diplomatic titles or the biological capabilities, but the unique viewpoint that comes from standing between worlds." The Queen's three eyes studied him with that now familiar deliberative blink. "The ancient texts speak of such beings, Kirvasha Talon, those who bridge the void between stars. For millennia, we assumed it was metaphorical. Perhaps it was prophetic instead." As the stellar convergence set course back to Velastra, Rohan felt a sense of purpose crystallizing within him. The path ahead would not be easy. Prejudice and suspicion would not disappear overnight on either world. There would be, Endless questions about his transformation, his loyalties, his very identity. Yet he had become living proof that the gap between human and alien could be bridged, not erased, not ignored, but spanned through understanding and sacrifice. His scars, both visible and invisible, were the price of that bridge. And as the stars streaked past the viewport, Rohan Hayes, diplomat, protector, Satyavash, knew with absolute certainty that they had been worth it. In saving an alien queen, he had changed not just his own fate, but potentially the course of two civilizations. The reward for his sacrifice was nothing less than the opportunity to create a future where the word alien might someday lose its power to divide, replaced by the simple recognition of different forms of life reaching toward the same stars. It was, he reflected with a smile, what humans do at their best, and what Valastrans could learn to do as well. Not just survive, but thrive together in a universe vast enough for all the forms that consciousness might take. The blood of two worlds now flowed in his veins, a living testament to possibilities yet to be explored. And whatever challenges awaited in the diplomatic corridors of Earth or the crystal chambers of Valastra, Rohan Hayes would face them as he had faced those assassins' weapons, standing tall between danger and hope, creating through his very existence a bridge between distant stars. Part 3. Stars United. The twin moons of Valastra hung low in the violet sky, their combined light casting dual shadows across the temple of celestial convergence. Built millennia ago from living crystal that had been coaxed rather than carved into form, the temple served as the sacred heart of Valastran spiritual life. No human had ever been permitted beyond its outer courtyard, until tonight. Rohan stood at the temple entrance, acutely aware of the historical significance of the moment. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of conflicting pressures. Earth Command demanding his immediate return, Ambassador Reynolds threatening to file formal complaints with the Interstellar Coalition, medical specialists from both species debating the implications of his transformation. In the end, his decision had come down to something simpler than politics or even duty. It had come down to potential, the potential for true understanding between two fundamentally different forms of sentient life. Your final opportunity to reconsider, Commander Hayes, said Ambassador Reynolds, who stood rigidly beside him in formal diplomatic attire. After hours of encrypted communication with Earth Command, she had been authorized to witness the ceremony, though her disapproval remained evident in every line of her posture. "My mind is made up, Ambassador," Rohan replied quietly. "The benefits outweigh the risks." "The benefits to whom?" she challenged. "Earth intelligence believes this entire scenario, from the attack to the ancient laws requiring this ceremony, may have been orchestrated to gain access to human genetic material and psychological profiles." Rohan shook his head. "I've reviewed all the evidence, including Valastran historical records verified by 3 independent xenohistorians. The attack was real, the laws are ancient, and the Queen's offer is genuine." "You can't be certain of that," Reynolds insisted, "especially with your judgment potentially compromised by whatever they've done to your biochemistry." Before Rohan could respond, the temple's massive crystal doors began to reconfigure, opening not by swinging on hinges, but by a flowing transformation of their molecular structure. Beyond them stood Queen Selene, flanked by members of the High Council and the Valastran religious caste. "The moons align," announced the chief hierophant, his ancient voice carrying despite its softness. "The stars witness. Let the Tiavash Koril commence." Reynolds gave Rohan one last measuring look. "Earth Command's final instruction. If at any point you feel endangered or compromised, use the emergency beacon. The orbital shuttle is standing by." Rohan nodded, though they both knew he wouldn't use it. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold that no human had passed before. The interior of the temple defied both physics and description. Crystal structures grew and flowed in real time, creating spaces that seemed simultaneously enclosed and infinite. Bioluminescent patterns rippled across surfaces, forming what Rohan now recognized as complex mathematical equations. The Velastran, form of sacred text. The queen extended a six-fingered hand in formal greeting. Commander Hayes, you honor Velastra with your decision. I hope to honor both our worlds, your radiance, he replied, acutely aware of the numerous eyes, some Valastron, some surveillance drones transmitting to Earth that watched their every movement. The ceremonial procession moved deeper into the temple, finally arriving at a central chamber where a pool of luminescent liquid occupied the exact center. Around its circumference stood 7 crystal pillars, each pulsing with a different color, that corresponded to the 7 major Velastran bloodlines. The pool of convergence, explained the queen, her voice taking on a formal cadence. Since the days before starlight, the royal bloodline has been renewed here. Today it welcomes blood from beyond the stars. The High Council members arranged themselves around the chamber, their expressions ranging from solemn approval to barely concealed hostility. The traditionalist faction, Rohan noted, had positioned themselves furthest from the pool, a subtle but clear statement of their position. The chief Hierophant raised his arms, beginning a harmonic chant that resonated with the crystal structures around them. As he sang, the liquid in the pool began to move of its own accord, forming patterns that rose into the air and hung suspended. The ceremony has 3 phases, Queen Selene explained quietly to Rohan. Declaration of intent, exchange of essence, and convergence of paths. Are you prepared? Rohan nodded, though his heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The changes to his body had accelerated over the past 3 days. His skin now showed distinct patterns that resembled Velastran scale formations, and his sensory perception had sharpened to uncomfortable levels. Most disconcerting were the moments of telepathic awareness, brief flashes of others' emotions that came without warning. The chief Hierophant approached, carrying an ancient crystalline dagger. Declaration of intent, he announced. Speak your purpose, Star Blood. Rohan had been coached on the traditional response, but in this moment, he chose to speak from his heart instead. I stand between worlds, as I once stood between death and your queen, not fully of Earth, not fully of Velastra, but committed to both. I seek not power or privilege, but understanding, the bridge that might unite our stars against those who would keep us divided.